o'clock, 6 p.m. Roll call, please, Nicole.
Member Frank Parks.
Present.
Member Steve Cooley.
Present.
I received a phone call that Bill Bengesa would not be available for tonight's meeting. I will mark him as absent. Vice Chair Richard Beneke.
Present.
Chair Baron Janetti.
Present.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
And Councilmember Martinez. I don't see him on here yet.
Okay.
There's Julio. Good morning.
Hey. Good. Hi, Julio.
I made it. Hello, everyone.
Okay, this time we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Hand over your chest. Repeat after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of
America,
and
to the republic, which stands
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
Liberty and
justice
justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight? Everybody's had adequate time to see that? Okay. Any disclosures or conflict of interest with the agenda tonight, items? None? Public comment period, items not on the agenda. Due to the circumstances, we are encouraging members of the public to maintain participation in our meetings by submitting any public comments via email or by teleconferencing in for phone-in comments. Please see the front of the agenda for specific directions. Are there any requests to speak, Nicole?
I have no public comments. Jeff, do we have anyone on the line?
No, we have no public comment on the phone.
Okay. So we will move down to action item number 1. It's the approval of the minutes from our meeting dated July 13th, 2020. Are there any requests to speak?
I have no written comments. And Jeff, no one on the line, correct?
There's no one on the line.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the July 13th minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Who's
Second.
that? Frank? Do I have a second?
I seconded it.
Okay, second, Nancy.
I'll do a
Any need for
quick,
any discussion on that?
I just
Okay.
want to point out I was late getting into the Zoom meeting, so I probably should abstain, but there wasn't that much on the minutes, so I'll go ahead and approve them.
Okay. We'll have a vote. If we could have a show of hands on the screen, all in favor of approving the minutes for July. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5, 6, Steve, and no abstentions or no.
Chair, if I could I do roll call for the vote?
Oh, excuse me. I guess I do have Nicole. Nicole, I'm sorry. You want a roll call vote?
Yes, please. Just for the record.
Yeah, I agree.
Frank Parks,
Yes.
Steve Cooley,
Yes.
Richard Beneke,
Yes?
Baron Janetti,
Yes?
Nancy Carroll,
Yes.
Julio Martinez.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Nicole. I run so many meetings right now, and we just do a show of hands for this one group I have. I'm used to it. I'll remember. Okay, number 2 on the agenda is review of proposed investment policy by the financial team. And our recommended action is to review the policy and recommend approval to the City Council to provide modifications for consideration for the council's prior to approval. So staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members, Jeff Molenkamp for the record. So we've been talking about this now for a few meetings, and so before the committee and ultimately, hopefully before the council tomorrow, is the investment policy. We've taken some care to go through the old policy, to look at other cities' policies. Actually, we went even through the CSMFO, which is essentially the municipal finance officers from around the state and then GFOA to go back and get best practices. We also consulted with the city manager and with our municipal advisor, UFI, to take a look at this. So there's been a few hands into this. We've gone through a few iterations. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to improve the investment returns for the city. Right now, all of our investments are either sitting in a checking account or in LAIF, which is run through the state controller's office. And that right now is only getting us about 70 basis points on our money. We have about 60 million in there. Earlier in the year, or I should say more into 2019, we were getting about 1.5 or 150 basis points. The bottom line is what we're trying to do is to make sure that we honor those principles of conservatism, but try and increase the amount of investment return the city can get. Your three basic principles are identified in your staff report and in the policy itself. Are as in the following order. Number one is the stability of principle and preservation of your capital. So whatever we do to try and drive return, we don't want to risk capital. And so we're going to still be a very conservative investor. Two is to meet liquidity requirements of the city. We certainly don't want to put money away that we don't have access to when we need it. And then lastly, but importantly, which is one of the reasons we're here, is to increase the yield on investment. I've asked Jennifer Station, who's done really all the work on this, she's senior accountant here with the finance department, to provide the rest of the overview of the policy. And then if need be, I'll circle back and then we'll be happy to answer questions. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. As Jeff said, I'm Jennifer Eustachian, senior accountant. And I've been reviewing the policy and going over it for a few months and trying to look at other policies and see how we can update ours. What we wanted to do was make the policy clearer and easier to understand. And how we did that is we took out repetitive language that was written in the old policy. We added in language that refers to maintaining investments to comply with state and local laws. We added in a requirement that financial dealers, investment advisors, and institutions will be selected through a competitive bidding process. We added 6 new investment options to allow for opportunity for a slightly higher return, but also keeping in mind the safety of principal and liquidity needs of the city. And the investment options which we added include state obligations, which is California and others, California local agency obligations, joint powers authority pools, money market mutual funds, commercial paper, and a CD laddering program. We added in a section that for any investment pools or mutual funds, there will be a full investigation into the fund prior to investment. We included language that the city will maintain liquidity to meet its expenditure obligations for the next 6 months. For bond proceeds, we made the indenture the governing document for investment of bond proceeds. We added a glossary for the reader's reference. And we also attached the document of allowable investments per state of California government code as of January 1st, 2020. And that we can easily update the attachment annually or as often as the state updates the document. And what we hope to accomplish is to expand investment options beyond LAIF to take advantage of other investment opportunities that will allow the city to properly diversify the city's portfolio at a slightly higher yield, but also maintaining the safety of principal while meeting the city's liquidity requirements. And with that, that's pretty much the highlights of anything we changed within the investment policy. And I'm gonna hand it back to Jeff so he could add any more comments before we go to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So really, she covered all of it. I think the main thing I wanted to point out is that it's identified in your staff report, and I think it's enumerated in the document itself. We're not experts in finance. I mean, we are in finance, but not in this type of finance, certainly in the investment world. And so should we go down the path, and I think it's likely we will, to look at expanding our investment horizon, we will want to secure investment guidance from professionals. So I think that's really one of the most important things for me in it, is I don't feel comfortable trying to manage investments out in the public marketplace for the city with my expertise level. I'm good at what I can do, but that's not one of my expertise levels. So should we go forward with any kind of commitments to invest our dollars that are not something like LAIF, then we will want to secure the advice of professionals. That will come at a cost, but what we'll be looking to do is very carefully look at that cost versus the return to make sure it ultimately is still a good deal for the city to move forward. But that's really it. I think Jennifer covered all of the highlights. Hopefully it's an easy to read document, and with that, we'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Jeff and Jennifer. Appreciate that review, especially the changes. When I reviewed the document the first time, that was my thing, is what are the changes there? Do we have any comments or from the public?
I have no written
There is
comments.
no public comment on the phone.
And I have no written.
Okay, no request to speak. Okay. I open it up for discussion.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I think it's prudent to try to maximize our finances if we have money just sitting around. But again, we have to do it in a safe manner. I think you've taken the precautions, at least the wording suggests that precautions are there for safeguarding the principal. I'm a little concerned because I've been involved with this to a certain extent in a prior life. And one of the biggest challenges was always to make sure you had enough money, to pay your bills, obviously. And sometimes you can chase these investments for a little better yield, but oftentimes that's at risk with a longer term. So you do run the potential or possibility of not having enough money because you got a 9-month CD or a 18-month or whatever, but for some reason your tax revenue didn't meet your expectations, or whatever happened, and you got to pull that money out, which always either gives you a penalty or you don't realize the interest that you were expecting in that investment. So I just want to make sure if we go down this road that we're all comfortable with knowing where our finances are at any particular point in the year, and knowing, our cash flow, and making sure that extra money we do have available is not subject to any kind of emergency take back that might cause us some problem. That's just an opening statement. I have a couple other questions I'll ask, but I'll send it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for further comment.
I don't have any. Frank, do you have any comment or questions?
Just wondering what the thoughts of the committee is on the mortgage-backed securities. 2008, that wasn't a good investment.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I was surprised that we'd be allowed to do mutual funds, to be honest, because they're risky. They're flipping a coin, especially as dynamic as the market has been over the last couple of months. I'm looking at the security of it, and when you go to secure things, you're less than a percent on returns. CDs are less than 1% right now. I know of one bank account that we have at our HOA that we're getting a little over 1% in the money market at this point, which is ahead of CDs. So we've been piling our money there as opposed to CDs. So Jeff, we're allowed to invest in, and Jennifer, in mutual funds, stock portfolios.
I'll go ahead and have Jennifer take this. She's done most of the research, but the short answer is yes, but I'll let Jennifer expand.
Yeah, we actually narrowed it down to only money market mutual funds. So those are primarily consist entirely of U.S. government securities. So
Okay.
they're very safe. Yeah, they're not going to have as high of a yield as what you would get in a different mutual fund, but you're going to have the safety of your principal. And that's included in the investment policy. That's strictly money market mutual funds.
Okay. Understand. Steve, you have any questions?
I just have a question about who may be selected to represent the city or to provide the services to the city. As I read it, it just says that determination should be made to ensure all approved broker, dealer firms and individuals are reputable and trustworthy and that they're licensed. Who's going to determine if they're reputable and trustworthy? And it just kind of opens a can of worms. We see a ton of fraud going on every year with licensed financial planners that hold all the licenses, but it is not a real closely regulated industry. Is there a expectation of what the city will do, or who's going to make that selection? Who's going to make the background check?
So I'll take a crack at that if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. So what we intend to do is to should this go forward, is to go out and solicit bids and proposals essentially from people, reputable dealers that would deal. But what we want to do is also, as we solicit that, we want to go forward with potentially involving the finance committee in that process. And also to reach out to the experts across the state. We have a network of people we deal with, and we'll find out who has done well with other cities. So either through the League of Cities or the Municipal Finance Officers Association, we're going to be able to get a little bit better feel who's working with whom and who's doing a good job. So I think there's a couple tools and vehicles we have in addition to just the licensing and those documentation.
Okay. I think it's something we would need to investigate more, because I'm with Steve as far as knowing who we're dealing with. I can say this, that the big firms, the Morgan Stanleys, the Merrill Lynch, they don't charge anything for that service. When you come and drop a lump of money, we drop about $10 million in the HOA and we pay nothing, because they're making money on the investments with the people they buy CDs and other investments, and it doesn't affect our yields on that. So I don't know how to apply to the city, but we got $60 million to be able to do it. We have pretty good access to our money liquidity wise, because we can pull out of CDs with no penalty. So, and there's other things. So I say we probably should look at those companies. They are more regulated and trying to keep their nose above the table. Richard, you had some more questions.
Yeah. I was looking. I just had some questions. I think it's good to have the quarterly reporting of these investments to the Budget Finance Committee. And it basically, under the reporting requirement, it says that the Finance Committee will receive from the treasurer a quarterly report that then would be taken to the city council. My question is, who would be preparing that report? Would it be the company that we hire for these investments, a Morgan Stanley, a Fidelity, et cetera, or would it be a staff person within the city? Somebody has to prepare that report for you, Barry, to bring it forth.
Oh,
I don't think
absolutely.
you're going to prepare the report, are you?
No, they would prepare a report according to what we would want to look at if we're going to hire. In my working with those kind of folks, they will deliver it. If you set up a laddering for your CDs, they will set up a framework of that laddering, so you know what CDs you have, when the openings are occurring for the laddering, so that you can present it. No, there's no way I would be able to put that together. And then there's going to be multiple investments based on what Jennifer and Jeff have said.
Yeah. So what we would propose to do, Mr. Chair and committee, would be that the staff, myself and Jennifer, would work with whatever advisor we secure. And the goals behind this are twofold. One, to make sure that the committee is comfortable and always informed, and then ultimately the council that we are operating within the policy. So that's one of the primary goals. And the other goal is, quite honestly, to let you know how we're doing, or what is our returns, and to the extent that we're looking to make any kind of shift in the investment strategy, we'll have that discussion as well, as long as it's within the policy. But the ultimate goal is to keep you informed so that you're comfortable that we're operating within the guidelines of the policy.
Is this going to be after the fact or before?
It's not contemplated that we would be coming back to the Finance Committee for investment decision guidance on a regular basis. That's why we would hire a consultant to do that work. What we would do is advise you what we've done and let you know, that we are in compliance, and here's the investments we have, and here's it, to the extent that we ever deviate from the policy, and that could happen by not even our own design, because an investment changes in midstream. We would want to identify any of those anomalies that might occur during the process.
I'm still uncomfortable without a definition of who qualifies for the city to function as one of those investment advisors. The way it is now, it's wide open. Anybody who's licensed could conceivably be appointed, and it doesn't appear there's any oversight before that appointment occurs. It's pretty broad, wide open, and I think that's led us to problems in the past. I think it needs to be a little more tightly controlled who might qualify to provide those services.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Like Jeff said, there are cities, and I know a lot of the cities do this. They do hire outside people. Get recommendations. Get a list of companies that have been in the business for many, many years. Cities feel comfortable with it, and then you could take a list of those and choose from them. And I also would recommend probably you making this program or decision, and of course it's council's purview to do this, but my recommendation would be that you put this on maybe a 2 or 3 year look-see, so to speak, period of time where we give it a good go and see where it's going. And obviously it's going to be reviewed every year. You get your audit, we get reports and everything, but just to have it on record that this would be reviewed in a couple years to just make sure it's going in the right direction, I think would be advisable.
I would agree there.
I have one, yes, Nancy.
Thank you. First of all, this is a pretty exciting change. It's scary, I agree. It makes me a little nervous to make these changes. But, we've been talking about, we've been looking at investment policy for a number of years now, kind of waiting till we got to the point where we felt that we had the internal staff to make sure that we were doing it appropriately. And also, financially, the city wasn't in the kind of position to do anything other than having the LAIF account. So it wasn't that we just were careless about parking the money someplace and we could have made more money. The city's stability meant that or instability at times, meant that we had to keep it in the most fluid but safe place that we could, which is why it's been in the LAIF account for so long now. So this is an exciting change. And Jennifer, I have to tell you, you did a superb job in writing up the documents and in doing your research. It's extremely easy to follow, and I'm glad you took out the redundancy. And it's nice to have this well-researched professional polish on it. So thank you very much for a job well done. There's a couple of things that I want to at least support. And one of them is that getting the right expertise outside of the city to guide us in some of these investments is critical. Now, we got the the Finance, Certified Finance Officers Association, and we have the Municipal Treasurers Association, Certified Municipal Treasurers. And all of the cities, when I went to those meetings, all of the cities that were doing well, run well, and were very careful about following guidelines, they would use someone independent of the city to guide them in their investments. So us picking the right person is key, and doing the kind of research you did, Jennifer, on who those people may be, so that we come up with a sort of recommended list and then see what kind of a response we get for a competitive bid, and making sure we've got some pretty good matches there, I think is a really good idea. I also agree that we need to keep a real careful eye on this for a period of time. Definitely the quarterly reports. And Baron, you're great, but you couldn't possibly have the team that they would have to do reports. And reports are the critical connection here too. So not only should we get someone that has a sterling reputation, that we have full confidence in, that goes by all of the guidelines that are put out by the State Controller's Office. Not only should we do that, but we also need to make sure that the reporting that we get is as detailed and exactly what we need to know. And if we need to ask for some sort of a monthly summary to get us started on a comfortable level where we get a little bit of a monthly update on where investments are going for a little while. It doesn't have to be an official report. That might be good to make sure that, because we're kind of crawling before we walk here. And, everybody's got a little bit of nervousness about making this kind of change. Now, one of the things that, and this is what we did with the trustees. When we went and changed trustees for the CFD money, the critical component was being able to get the kind of reporting that we needed to make sure, and that was why we chose the trustee that we did. Didn't go quite as smoothly as we hoped, but we'd been using Union Bank, which were terrible at the time for reports. So the reporting issue is very important to the city. Also, the city needs to really stay on top of this so that we don't have not only any loss of money, but any loss of credibility within the community. Because every step that we've been taking now for the last, since I've been involved, last 6 years, has been to really make sure that our credibility is untarnished on everything that we can do. So with that in mind, I do have a particular question. Sweep accounts. Jennifer, do you want to talk, or Jeff, a little bit about sweep accounts? Because I'm no investment whiz, but I have a little bit of concern about sweep accounts. They sound great, but it's always, the devil's in the details of the implementation. So I'll be quiet.
Yeah, Jennifer,
now.
would you mind taking that one?
Yeah, well, we actually have looked into our current bank, and as of right now, they do not offer any type of sweep account investment vehicle. So that is not an option that we have, at least with our current bank. That it might be something we can look into later on, but that would be a whole nother RFP process. And then you would also have to make policies that go within that bank on how they're going to handle that. As far as timing and how everything's going to work, what's involved. And that would be almost a review process in itself if we did go out to do that.
Yeah, that was one of the only changes that had me a little bit of concerned. And you're right. When we get to that particular point, there's a lot of specifics we want to put in there, because there can be some thrashing from higher yield accounts into bond accounts, And, that always is a bad idea. So good for the institution, but bad for us, so.
Right.
Anything else, Nancy?
I think I tried to make my notes here. Let's see. No, I'm good. I'm sure the monthly, some sort of a snapshot monthly sounds a little bit like overkill, and it may be, but I think we're all a little bit nervous about this change. But the guidelines that are put out by the State Controller's Office are very cautionary and safe. So as we continue to move like this, where we're operating so well within the guidelines, I think we're going to be okay.
Julio? Julio disappeared on me, but I don't know if he has any comments. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I do. The dog decided to go out right now, so. So, some great comments. Basically, I do agree that, first of all, thank you for this clean report. It's a very good policy. It's been cleaned up. It is very professional, so thank you for that. And, as a committee member, I'm looking at it from the point that, do we have a sound policy? Is it covering, I agree with everything we said about having the, looking into the safest securities, making sure that we have preserving principle and stuff. So the whole structure's there. So we have that in place. I think we have a good policy with some clean words, and it makes sense. And I think Nancy brought up a point about public, trust. So we have that in the policy, I think, where we have some safeguards in there. I do agree that I'm concerned about, who we get and the directors and so forth that we choose. But what I want to know is, so we've come to the conclusion that we need to try to get a little bit more money than we are. So we already come to that conclusion. We want to look for investments. So my question is, should we have some, I don't know if we want to say a report or a way where we can have a professional give us kind of a breakdown of what are we looking at? What can we expect? Or is that coming after we pick somebody? Because before we start going in and digging and everything, I want to make sure that this is really somewhere we want to go. Because I'm very conservative when it comes to public money, and I am nervous. And, to me, I would be fine leaving it in late rather than going in and trying to make more out of it. That's just the way I am. But, I'm willing to go out of my comfort area and start looking at these different things. But I want professionals to tell me, okay, here's what you can do. You can do this, you can put half of it here and leave the rest. Somebody mentioned about testing the waters up. Maybe we should put a little bit now, or should we hold a little back? I don't know any of that. That's my questions I have for the professionals. So we're okay. I'm okay with the policy. I think it looks good as a committee member. I think we've done a good job, or you've done a good job setting it up, and I like it. And I don't have much issue with the policy itself. As a council member, I have concerns going to the next level. So I want to know, okay, what are we expected to get into? What are we, what are their different options that we're looking at? And I'm just not sure if that comes later. Do we have to go through the whole process and find somebody? Can we find someone that's willing to come out and give us a little bit more information before we make that jump, as far as looking into all these, different people, brokers and what have you. Another question I have is, when you were looking at, Jennifer, when you were looking at the different cities, to compare policies, do you say that there's more cities that do have outside investments, or do you see that more cities are staying with the LEAF and being more on the conservative side?
I think most of the cities I reviewed had outside investment services provided to them.
Okay, so this is just something that maybe we're a little apprehensive, some of us getting into, but looking at the industry, it's something that's out there that's pretty prevalent. And
Yeah.
so, okay. So again, I just wanted to make my comments out there that I like the policy. I agree. I don't see anything that we need to change. I like the direction. I like the purpose. I was concerned at first about the cost of whoever was going to run it. When Jeff had brought that up, we have to outweigh the cost versus the return. But even so, I think it's still worth looking into. I'm just not sure, I'm not sure what the next level looks like. And Jeff, you kind of outlined and framed that a little bit of what we were going from here. So if we, as a committee, say, okay, we like this, I think, maybe a little tweak here, a little bit more fine tuning or a little bit more oversight or whatever, and then it goes to the council tomorrow and the council decides, okay, let's look into this. Jeff, are we looking into going out right away to find people? Or like I said, do we have some way of getting some more info between that and going out to find people?
I think we have options. My intention had been to, after, if we get support tonight and then the council support tomorrow night, had been to start the effort of looking for that investment advisor or advisors who would help us in this process. And having heard what I've heard tonight, there's enough concern and apprehension about selecting the right advisor and that transparency and that accountability that's necessary. I think it might be a great idea to do something similar to what we did with the audit, and that have a couple of finance committee members join in a selection committee, something similar to that. I think that way we have this body's involvement in at least the selection of that advisor, to look at the costs and look at their proposals. Because I would suppose that we would get at least 2 to 3, maybe more proposals. We'd narrow it down like we did with the audit down to the top 2 or 3. And then we would look at the proposals, both from what you're talking about, the standpoint of what services do you offer to what cities, how do you ensure that we meet the goals and the objectives of our policy, which is stability, principal, liquidity, and then ultimately to try and drive a little bit better investment return. Ultimately, if the council has enough apprehension where they want to go a little bit slower, then we could bring a couple of proposals forward to the council, or we could let the committee do that work and then ultimately just recommend an investment advisor. We wouldn't start on this until the council approved the investment advisor. So that would be at least my process, or that I would propose tonight.
Couple of comments. I've heard a couple things kicked out about no-fee advisors. No-fee advisors earn their money by selling you an investment. They don't do it for no fees. It may appear to be, but that's not the case. And if you want pure, raw investment advice, you're going to pay a fee to them. So let's make sure that that's clear. You're not going to get somebody who's just going to give you the advice. They're going to want a fee. The second thing is this a good time to jump into it? The policy's great. I think it's great. I think there's a little fuzziness about who can be appointed or what that process is. But in the investment world right now, everything is pretty darn stagnant. There's not a lot of opportunity. Is this a good time for the city to jump into it, or do we need to see what's happening with the economy first?
So I'll just kind of respond generally to that last question. So we can go as slowly as necessary. I do not anticipate we're going to shotgun out of the gate and be a very aggressive investor. I don't think we're ever going to be aggressive investors. I think that to the extent that there's some concerns about how we do this, first of all, we would look for advisors. We would compare those just the same as we did with the audit. We would look at how they're making their money and what their process is, whether it's fixed or whether it's on a basis of a product sold. We can look at all that in that committee format and have clear understanding of how they make their money and what we'll be paying. But we can go as slow at this as we need to, or we can go a little quicker. The bottom line is that I think that's always going to be a good time for us to look at look at other options to see if they make sense for us, and they may not. I'd like to also ask maybe if the city manager has any thoughts on this as well.
Thank you, Jeff. So, Mr. Cooley, I think your question about is this the time to be in the market and what would you pursue is the exact kind of question that we would ask of our advisor, because they'll be keeping track. I don't know that I would look for a fee-free based service. I think we're better, as you suggested, with a fee-based provider. I will say that the organizations I've managed, we have utilized these types of municipal advisory services to, I really think, good effect. So typically what you'll do is you'll select your advisor, your MA, and from there you'll sit down with them and presumably some representatives of the Finance and Audit Committee to really identify what our goals and objectives are. What specifically are we looking for them to bring to the table to our community? And then they will coordinate back with our finance staff, Jennifer and Jeff, to affirm whether or not that is an instrument or investment that we are looking to make. But they'll understand, we'll run cash flow models. They'll help us work through that, look at what cash we need to keep on hand and the timing of that. So they'll have an understanding and they'll help us work through that process to help identify that. What I would propose, considering the discussion we've had tonight, is we would look at an RFQ process first. So we'd go out for requests for qualifications. We could then pre-qualify the MAs that we may be interested in receiving bids from, and then they could submit proposals to us, and then we could look and select from pre-qualified municipal advisors. The other thing to keep in mind is MAs are required under SEC rules to also become certified. So there's an ongoing reporting and oversight mechanism that occurs through the SEC and through the federal agencies also. So there is a high degree of qualification required to hold the certification to operate as a municipal advisor. That's going to be critical because there's an element to it that they'll be looking to provide investments for or advice for investments. There's also a component that we'll be looking at the investment potentially of bond funds, whether they're CFD-oriented, wastewater fund-oriented, or any other kind of municipally issued bonds that we may have proceeds that we're holding on to. So, those are the elements that will kind of come together when we go through that process. So I think this is a good overview. It gives us our direction. It's enough detail to allow us to go out and select our municipal advisor. We go through an RFQ process, pre-qualify, and that should include representatives of the audit committee to be a member of that team, to develop the RFQ, and then to review those results. And then we request our proposals. And then from there, again, the team would come together and look at those proposals, evaluate those, and it culminates to a recommendation to council. The very next step in that process, once they're selected, would be to sit down with them, evaluate where we are, what our options are, and then if we see we have selected someone who's pushing products on us that we're not comfortable with, that's an immediate red flag. But that's the process I think we would go through. It's an interactive process that is really required to be able to walk through this process. And anyway, so, and again, that's something that I've utilized in other organizations very effectively, and we got fairly decent returns to that process.
Last question. To actually hire somebody is going to have some cost involved. Do we have a budget for that? Do we need to budget for it in the next budget period? And what's the cost involved of beginning to request some RFPs? Are we have funds to do that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say that the goal behind this obviously would be to look. Most of these packages are going to be that they're going to take some money out of what you earn. There's going to be a consulting fee of some sort or another. If this didn't turn out to where we were highly confident that it was going to pencil out to net the city more money than it was going to cost, we wouldn't go down the path. We would have to be certain or fairly highly certain that the costs would be less than the earnings we would receive from it. So I think we're fine in that regard.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, Nancy.
Hey, whoops. Am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Okay, thank you. First of all, I have a lot of confidence that we're going to have really good eyes on this. within our team. So I think it's part of what we often refer to as becoming a grown-up city, that we change the policy and that we start to creep forward on this. I also have the same concern that Steve has about the current economic environment that we're in. It's a tough one to call ahead of time. So, but I think that obviously this is well-researched change to policy. That doesn't mean we're going to go crazy and start throwing money around. We've got a good team keeping our eyes on it. For any member of this committee, I would encourage them to, if they want more information on the types of, I'll say people, but it's really companies like Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, whatever, that handle this work with cities. You'll see presentations that are archived, and I think they're open to the public, on the Certified Municipal Treasurer's website, and it's probably also on the Municipal Finance Officer's website, where they have presentations that are done by these type of investment advisors, and they know what the city's restrictions are. They know what the state controller's office has put in place after the Orange County debacle, where it was invested in poorly and put them near bankruptcy. Most of these restrictions were put in place after that, and these investment advisors have done presentations to those groups at conferences that are archived on their website. So if you want to see a little bit about who they are and what they do, not that that's going to be part of our choice process, but it gives you a little bit of a feel for how maverick they are or not, and how much they have to walk a straight line to keep the business of the cities. And I agree, most of the well-run, financially stable cities, this is what they do with their money. Exactly what we're talking about doing here. They don't keep it in the LAIF fund. We only kept it there because that's kind of what we had to do for the situation that we were in. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to want this business. Barry, you mentioned that, and that's absolutely true. But I think if we cautiously move ahead with well-structured policy, we have a good team that keeps their eye on it, we have a strict and well-thought-out evaluation process, and we are cautionary about what the financial environment is right now, then I think this is very well done. I think you all did a really good job with this. And I don't want my being cautious or making comments about how we need to take baby steps for a little while here to be that I don't support the strength of the team and the well done that this policy is. We know that we need to keep our credibility and watch every penny and make sure we're doing the right thing. And I feel confident that we will. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, I just like to say, listening to all this, there's two things. One, we have a policy that was brought forth tonight, a really good policy, very easy to understand and covers ourselves legally the way we should be and all the right things. And that's what we're recommending now. In no way are we going to that second phase right now, executing a financial advisor or any of that. Is this policy a sound policy? Is it self-explanatory? Can anybody move in and see it? And then I think step two will be, if the council approves the policy, that's still the policy, I think we would come back, Jeff and Jennifer, come back with a process. And you say RFP, but there'll be a process. I would go to some of these other cities that you've talked to ask them how they went about the process, get the names of some of the people they're using, come up with that criteria so we can assure what Steve was worried about, people that are licensed and are more respectable in the industry, and cull it down to 3 or 4 and actually give them an assignment, because what Julio was saying is, do we want to do this if we're not going to get any more money than what we're getting now? And we feel pretty comfortable with the lathe, it just sits there. And you could give them a scenario. You could tell them, we have $60 million. How would you invest it? How would you spread it out following our criteria, and let them come in and do a case study presentation, and then we'd be able to say, yeah, geez, they got us an extra 0.25% or something. With their fees, they would factor in their fees. So I think right now, tonight, we need to make a recommendation. Do we feel the policy is sound enough to go to the council?
I would so move that we move this to the council.
Okay.
I agree with everything said. I think it's a great policy. It's about time. You know, you never get ahead if you don't take a few small steps forward. So this is one small step, and I think it's in the right direction. So I would move that we go ahead and whatever we have to do.
We need to recommend approval for the council.
Yeah,
To the
I'd
council.
go ahead and recommend it.
And I would second that.
Okay, and we have a second.
I would second
Could I
it.
have Okay. Roll call vote, Nicole?
Member Parks?
Aye.
Member Cooley?
Yes,
Vice Chair Beneke?
Aye.
Chair Janetti?
Yes?
Councilmember Carroll?
You're muted, Nancy.
Yes.
Councilmember
Gotcha.
Martinez?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer and Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I did not ask for any public comment. Or did I? Did we ask for public comment before?
Yes.
you did.
Okay. Okay, we're moving to item 3 on the agenda, which is the fiscal year 220 general fund and wastewater fund budget to actual through June 2020. We're to review and file these financial reports. A staff report, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So before you, as we've done for the last several months, we missed last month, but we've been going through monthly and going through your 2 major operating funds, which are the general fund and the wastewater fund. Now what you have here is near final. I say near final because we still have a few adjustments we're making internally. Those are going to be actually settling down and be completed within the next couple of weeks. And then we have the auditors coming back out to do their year-end audit work. They were out for their interim work. They've reviewed our internal controls and taken a look at how we do things from a process standpoint. They'll be coming out and doing the testing and the year-end review of our audit balances and looking at a transactional review and things of that nature during October. So in that process, they could come up with some classification challenges or look to make some adjustments. So when I say near final, those are the things that would make changes in these numbers. Having said that, we're pretty close to the end on this one. And I'll walk you through the numbers. The spoiler alert, if you've had a chance to look at it and look at the numbers, is we're much to the good. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is and why it came as a bit of a surprise. But I'm going to start off by talking about your general fund revenue. So if you've got that attachment in front of you, I believe it didn't have my notes when it initially came out. So you will want to grab what Nicole sent out a little bit later, actually this morning. So where we really had the nice returns in this last quarter were in the sales tax. Property tax came in a little bit over budget. We exceeded our thresholds there by a couple $100,000 from what we had initially estimated back in June when the council approved it, the 21 budget. And so that was good. We got a little kick up on there. We ended up about 6.1 million between the 2 major lines there. Franchise fees, we came in pretty much on target there. And then sales tax, we're about $1.5 million to the good from where we thought we were going to be. And there are three primary drivers of that. One is we got one-time bumps from financing activities from some of the businesses that operate in the city. And those transactions actually totaled into about $800,000 or just under that in that bump, which we should consider as one-time funds because you can't count on those types of things on a recurring basis. We also received a bit of a kick up in the county pool. This is online sales activity, and we got a couple $100,000 there that's above and beyond what we would normally see in a fiscal year, and that is largely to do with the impacts of COVID, because that kick up happened in the fourth quarter. And then we actually, in fairness, had some returns from our city businesses that were better than we anticipated. We had some expected drops in some businesses that didn't occur, and some businesses fared a little bit better than we thought they would during that fourth quarter, where we were expecting harder hit and a little bit more of what we call that deferral of revenue. As you know, the governor allowed for a deferral of sales tax. Not many of our businesses took advantage of that, and so we actually got the cash in on almost all of those businesses that had the option to defer payment of sales tax. We did have some sectors that did get hit pretty hard, but so despite all that positive news, we did have some like fuel and service stations, for example, took a hit. General consumer goods took a hit. Restaurants and hotels, as we might expect, took a hit. So we had some challenges from COVID, but they weren't as significant as we expected. So all of those major factors together, sales tax came in about $1.5 million over our estimate, and it is the big driver of the increase in numbers beyond what we were talking about 2 months ago. Going back down through, and then I'll turn it over to questions once I'm done here. Going back down through our city permitting activity, our business development activity came in pretty close to where we thought it would a couple months back. We're not too far off of what our estimates were. Charges for services were a little bit to the good on that, but not much. It's just a little bit of a kick up. As the city reopened, we started seeing a little bit more business activity. As I go down through looking at overall revenues, we ended up about $1.9 million to the good compared to where we were when we were adopting the budget back in June 2nd. So that estimate is up about $1.9 million. And again, the biggest driver of that being sales tax. If I go down then and start looking at expenditures, we were a little over the expected expenditures in personnel services to a couple $100,000. That's driven by some overtime costs. It was also driven by some increase in workers' comp, and quite honestly, just the pay came in a little bit higher than we expected. Ultimately, that was made up by being under budget on the operating side. When I say under budget, under our previous expectations, by about the same dollar amount. So on our expenses, we were really dialed in pretty close to where we thought we'd be back in June. Really within $100,000 on the overall expenditures. So the fact that we are going to give you a surplus, I say we because I want to take credit, of nearly $8 million is driven from a few factors. One, it's the $5 million one-time revenue that we all know related to our solid waste franchise fee. Also $1 million in sales tax that we should consider as one-time money. So that's $6 million of that $8 million surplus is one-time in nature, which leaves about $2 million to the good. I say about $2 million because on an ongoing basis, we still have to scrub these numbers a little bit to see how reliable that surplus is on a going forward basis, that the council can look at that and go, oh, wow, that tells me that we're good going forward. We still have to scrub the numbers a little bit to make sure that we feel that confident in that statement. Having said that, the general fund is looking quite good. We are going to have a surplus of nearly $8 million. And that's about $1.5 million better than I thought we'd be a few months back. So I will be happy to stop talking and answer questions.
Questions?
Chair, if I could maybe just make a quick question to Mr.
Go.
Mollenkamp. So with regard to the sales tax that we saw, one of the things that I think is an issue to think about would be what other factors have influenced that sales tax number. For example, there's been some enhanced unemployment benefits that have since expired. We are looking at the fact that we may not see any additional enhancements beyond what's currently allocated through the state. And that's looking at some additional unused CARES Act money that came to fund the $300 per week benefit, which is down from the $600 that was a global for unemployed. In addition to that, we had a lot of PPP money that had been floating out there and had been applied to the business side. So when we contemplate what happens with that sales tax number moving forward, don't we see that that's a couple of key factors that we need to take into consideration in looking at that forecast?
Okay. Nicole, are there any requests to speak from the public?
I have no written comments.
And there's no one on the phone either.
Okay, just wanted to check bases there. Committee, any committee members have any questions? Raise your hand if you do. Frank, go ahead.
I need some clarification on this 8 million surplus. I look at total revenue 38 and total expenses of 33. I'm not sure where the 8 comes from. Am I missing something?
Yeah, so your total revenues are a little over 39 million. If you got to go to that column to the farthest right column. And then hopefully you've got the one that Nicole sent out, because I think there might have been a cutoff on the one that went out earlier. I'm not certain. And
No,
then,
I'm not looking at that one.
and then your expenditures are a little over 31 million. So that's where you get up to 7.9 and some change.
Okay, I must be looking at the wrong one then. And why is there a difference between the one Nicole sent out and the one that was part of the package?
I think it might have cut off a column. I think that the file format was that it might have cut off that last column. That's my thought. So what you're looking at is the budget number, I believe, the numbers that you just referred to.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? Richard?
Yeah, I just had a question. You mentioned in your notes about the largest driver of that one expense being workers' comp. I've kind of noticed a trend in the city over the last 3-4 years on workers' comp kind of bumping up each year. And I'm just wondering what, if anything, the city is doing to kind of take a look at that to see what the reason is for that, and if there's anything we can do to kind of get that a little bit under control, because it can get out of hand.
I think that's more of a policy discussion. I don't know, Mr. City Manager, if you want to try and address that.
Maybe a comment, because I don't think it fits in. We're not looking for a solution for that, but I think
It's just a comment. Yeah.
comment. Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Nancy?
No, good point though, Richard, on the workers' comp. I'll leave that to comments by the city manager. If he's not on now, I'll ask him to, maybe email you a comment to answer your question. But we have been watching workers' comp go up, and other cities have too. And we do try to be as competitive as we can in choosing our coverage. But rates have consistently been going up for workers' comp coverage overall. And, Jenna, it also, it depends on how many claims you also have that are outstanding against you, how competitive you can be. So that makes it how attractive you are as a potential customer. But I'll ask the city manager, or Jeff, you can, to maybe just make sure that Richard gets a little bit more of a descriptive answer for him.
Yeah, now we'll get with Carrie on that because she's one of
Yeah.
our experts in that field.
Carrie is the person, yeah.
So we'll circle around with her and try and see if we can't circulate out a response to that observation.
Would that be worthwhile to have as an agenda item in the future where we look at what the trend has been and what actions the city's taking? Okay. Julio, you have any comments or questions on the?
Yeah, just remind me where our pension obligations are noted at and how we know what's coming up and what to expect on that. So they've been rising and we talk about surplus and so forth, but then, you talk about increased obligations on that.
So within this document here, your budget to actual document, your expenditures related to pension costs are shown in your benefits column under personnel services. That's where they are. They were about, I think, just under $3 million of that 5.6 million is your retirement costs, your pension costs. The liability itself is going to be shown on the balance sheet. It's going to be a liability that's booked on the balance sheet. And so that will be reflected in these documents. Now, the payment against the liability as part of our expenditure is part of that number.
Okay, and that was the question I had on that, the benefit column. All right, thank you.
You bet.
Chair, can I make a
Steve?
suggestion?
Yes, Nancy.
I think it was a very good question about workers' comp, and Jeff is right. Carrie is the person that is the workers' comp czar, so to speak. I think to get a brief answer to Richard's question, maybe it should go to the whole committee.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I
Just copy the whole committee, so that as if Carrie was here answering the question, Richard gets his answer, and everybody gets to hear what the answer would have been.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Good idea.
Fine. Good. Thanks, Nancy. Steve, I see your hand.
I just want to say, and I don't know if anybody's noticed it as strongly as me, but we're just wrapping up the year. We've got numbers that are pretty firm, a little bit of scrubbing going on. Hey, this is such a difference from what we've had instead of, well, there might be a huge change in 3 months. We don't know. Maybe in 4 months we'll know where we're at. We're here. Hallelujah. Thank you. The staff right now has just made a world of change from what we've seen over the past several years. And some kudos need to be given out. Just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Jeff, you want to go over the?
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, and thank you for that. Always pleased when the numbers come out good. always makes me happy when the numbers are better than you anticipated, not worse.
Well, having the numbers is wonderful. Doesn't matter that the numbers are good. We've at least got numbers. And that's somewhat unusual for us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, and I'll pass that on to the team. Much appreciated. So on the wastewater side of things, we hopefully everybody's got that schedule out. Again, go to the one that Nicole sent out this morning because that's going to be the one that doesn't have a cutoff. I apologize for that. So your revenues actually came in a little higher than we anticipated, and those revenues are complete numbers now. So you have your main revenue source, which is the sewer fees that we charge. It came in at just under 10.2 million, with your overall revenues really just above 10.2 million, which is nice because it came in slightly over our budgeted number of about 9.9 million. So that's good. That's early in the year, I was thinking we might come in a little bit short. But those numbers did build as the year went on. A number of reasons for that. One is the the fact that we're just increasing both the residents and the businesses that are paying a sewer fee. And so it's gone up. We also did really well on our cost containment. You can see that we were under budget on both the personnel side of things and on the operating costs. Collectively, we were, several $100,000 to the good. We did end up using our contingency fund primarily for a major repair to one of our lines that was done during the year. Those costs will be capitalized, so we'll be moving those costs over to the balance sheet through our audit adjustments. But I wanted to show those here so that you could see where those costs went. Then we'll be moving those out to the balance sheet. Our transfers came in a little under what I had projected, primarily because we didn't actually do some of the capital projects that we had contemplated. Having said that, you'll see that I have a line item for funds that are committed to capital projects, so those monies that I initially planned to transfer out in this last fiscal year will actually be transferred over for those projects in fiscal year 2021, the year we're in now. And so I wanted to reflect that on there so you could see that while we have a surplus of $360,000, that we would have been at 1.2 million had I not designated those funds for the intended purpose. We have 4 major capital projects that those funds were designated for. So at the end of it, I'm pleased to say that we thought we were going to be between $300,000 and $400,000 to the good, and that's exactly where we've ended up. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Any public comment first? There were questions?
I have no written comments.
And there's no one on the line either.
Okay. Committee questions?
I have one question, and forgive me if I've asked this question before, because I don't remember. But on the admin overhead costs, what actually is entailed with those costs? It seems, to me, admin overhead costs probably is not what is being represented here in this category. So could you explain to me what actually is included in admin overhead costs?
I don't remember, I don't know the genesis of this specific number, how it was computed. I've gone back to look at that a little bit, and I was unable to find the exact computations. We have this over with transit as well. What it's intended to accomplish is to identify that there are costs associated with managing these funds that reside in the general government services. It would be the costs of me running these reports, for example, the city manager dealing with matters, the assistant city manager dealing with matters related to the management of the wastewater fund, and then human resources, all those things that are centralized, those functional services that don't show up anywhere in this budget, but which need to be borne, some of those costs, by this budget. So what this is intended to do is to charge some of those costs to these 2 proprietary funds, the transit fund and the wastewater fund, to capture for the general fund the costs of some of those services. We are in the process, and I was just recently talking with the city manager about needing to do our cost allocation study. And so I will be working with Jennifer very soon on actually going out to bid for a cost allocation contractor to come in and assist us. What we do, and I'll try and make this short, is what we do is we look at the overall costs of the city, and then we drop those down into how many of those belong in wastewater, belong in transit, attached to our different services, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that made some sense.
And Jeff, if I may jump in.
These monies go to outside agencies that support the wastewater treatment plant operation.
This money here goes to the general fund to pay for the services that the general fund supplies to the wastewater fund.
And the general fund being the city of Beaumont.
Yeah, it's where most of your operations are. It's where my office is housed, human resources, the city manager, police department, all those.
Yeah, I just think in respect to transparency, it might be a good idea to kind of take a look at those. I'm not questioning that they're they're wrong or anything like that, but I mean, it's just, it's one of those accounts that is a big number and it sits there and it just begs for people to say, what the hell's going on here?
Well, if I can, let me interject real quick. Let me interject. We did a financial overhead analysis a couple years ago before Jeff was here. Michael Bush with Urban Futures actually helped us run that analysis. So we do need to upgrade that. We've just launched the new sewer plant. We've got additional costs. We have a better idea about what our financial operations are. So there is a basis for that number that was done a few years ago, and it is time to go back through a process to reevaluate and update that number. So it isn't just made up. It's not a pie in the sky number that we grab. There is a basis behind that number.
No, I understand that, yeah, and I appreciate the answer, and I think it'll be good to go and do that analysis, in the near future.
Okay, questions? Anybody got their hands up? Nope. Julio, no. Nancy, no. Frank? Steve?
Nope.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much. Very positive, very, very good note. It ought to be good tomorrow night for the council to see these numbers. Very, very positive.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think what we need here is a motion to receive and file.
So move.
Second.
Second, Richard. Roll call, please.
Member Parks?
Yes.
Member Cooley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Beneke?
Yes.
Chair Janetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Carroll?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Subcommittee updates, I know we have it on the menu, on the agenda, but I know we're not doing anything with it right now because of the situation we're under. So we're still in a hold. Although the investment policy was something that we had talked about updating. So we do have some progress in that area. And Jeff and Jennifer have done a wonderful job. Any other comments that I may have missed on the subcommittee updates? Okay. Meeting review treasure. Well, I think we spent a lot of time on something that's very good and very neat. It was the new investment policy. I think we also uncovered that we want to be really sure-footed in the execution of that. So the policy looks pretty solid from the consensus tonight. When we go forward with this, if the council goes forward, obviously it's going to be a very deliberate lockstep process so that we're really sure that we're getting the right people and we're getting our money's worth out of it, that we're getting more than leaving the money there. The other thing is we reviewed the budgets and just a very positive outcome that we had about $8 million surplus in the general fund and $360,000, $350,000 in the wastewater. And there are my comments. Jeff, you have some comments?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you. Just to let you know kind of what we're doing over in finance other than these reports and investment policy. We are closing out our fiscal year. We're making the final adjustments to it. All of the transactions that go into the prior fiscal year 20 had to be in by the end of August. That time is come and gone, and so we're putting the final touches on that year. In the meantime, we are preparing for auditors to come out in October to do the year-end work. And then we're spending some time right now analyzing the financial results from fiscal year 20, starting the process of looking at the results coming in for 21. And believe it or not, starting to get ready for the next budget period. It's not too far down the road. So we'll be starting to really work on financial forecasting and things like that. And we'll, it never stops. So we'll feel good to have jobs though.
How's your new digs down there in the city? You all moved in?
It's good. I feel like taking everybody on a tour, but I got this background. I can't really do it. But
okay.
Yeah, we're right across the street, or right across the hall from council chambers. I could almost reach out and touch Mr. Cooley, but we're not supposed to right now.
Okay. Nancy, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Jeff, so I heard you say about meeting with the auditors in October. Are we still on the timeline exactly where we should be to get the report on a timely basis?
Yeah, I've seen nothing so far or heard nothing that suggests that we won't make our time schedule. My goal is to get an audit to the, a completed audit to the council, obviously finance committee first, but then the council by the end of January. And I believe we'll achieve that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Jeff? Are there any, I did skip over this, future agenda items? Anybody have any thoughts on anything they would like to have on the agenda? Okay. With that, I would say that the meeting is adjourned at 7:20 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
good seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Be
Take
safe.
care.